welcome to the Lobcast Podcast, Mixers and Marketing. I'm Stephanie Donaldson, your hostess with the Marketing Mostess, and I'm the Senior Content Marketing Manager here at Lob. I'm thrilled to be joined by Mike Tuffley, VP Solutions Engineering. Tuffley, do you mind introducing yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, happy to. So again, my name is Mike Tuffley. I'm the head of Solutions Engineering. So effectively all things technical in our customer-facing side. So I'm really the mad scientist of Lob. So all of the cool stuff that we get to see presented in demos, like all of that futuristic technology that we're bringing to the world of direct mail, oftentimes that originates out of my head and the folks on my team.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And listeners, if you want to make the complimentary cocktail that goes with this episode, which is an old-fashioned, you're going to need 2 ounces of bourbon or rye whiskey, a 1/4 ounce of simple syrup, 2 dashes of Angostura bitters, and either an orange peel or a Luxardo cherry for garnish. I chose a cherry for mine, but cheers, Tuffley, and welcome to the show. All right. So today we're going to be talking about a topic that many marketers like to focus on, optimization. So Tuffley, you work pretty closely with our customers. What are some of the top challenges that you found that they're trying to solve by optimizing their direct mail?
Absolutely. Even when I hear like, oh, it's not about ROI, like, let's be real, it's always about ROI. So they're trying to optimize for one of 2 things. How do we maximize that return, and how do we minimize that investment? So, we'll use marketers for example, that they're like, oh, how do we increase that average cart size, or what sort of use cases can we get to re-engage folks in life cycle marketing use cases, like hey, 60-day win backs, or maybe an abandoned cart type of use case. How do we maximize customer LTV, like all of those things that they're going to experiment with in terms of like the offers or the creative things like that, to really try and capture a higher response and a higher conversion rate. And then on the other hand, it's going to be, okay, how do I minimize that investment? A lot of folks, especially the larger, more mature organizations that have been leveraging direct mail as a channel for decades, have completely bloated processes. The timelines are obscene. The amount of like human resources and energy and back and forth to get something shipped takes forever. And then when it does get shipped, there's still all of the fallibility of a not data informed approach to executing on these campaigns. How much of that mail gets returned and shows up in giant USPS tubs to your office, or you have to go clear out a PO box? So like contending with all of that realized waste as well. So how do we make sure that offers aren't being forwarded when a customer moves, and they file that change of address with the USPS? How do we make sure that if an offer is not valid there, we don't want to have it forwarded, and then it's a poor customer experience. Not only that, but maybe the household where the offer would have been valid doesn't receive that mail piece, and we spent money. So there's all this really bad experience and waste that's generated as a result. So those are the 2 things that I see most folks trying to optimize for. Like I said, I'm a scientist. I'm a mathematician. I always think of optimization in that perspective. So the lens of like, okay, we have a multivariable function. We want to find all of those maximums, all of the minimums. So like one axis is going to be, like that return axis. Like, how do we have like a higher response rate?
Yeah.
And then another axis is going to be, the cost associated, whether it's
Mm.
the hard costs of the printing operations or some of the softer costs of the time and manpower that goes into getting these things out the door. And
Yeah.
then where do I and then a third one could be something entirely different. And then where can I find those maximums? And you can only do that through like continually experimenting and iterating. And that's optimization. It's a journey, not a destination.
I love that. That's perfect. And I mean, I think both of our teams benefit from each other, right? Like you can think of the mathematical side, which, no offense, but my brain does not do very well. I did okay in algebra, but I'm okay not dabbling in math anymore. But I love coming up with the creative side of things, especially doing those A/B tests. Like, what CTA options can we do? What kind of copy can we change? How much can swapping out an image of, father and son for a mother and daughter, how much could that really improve conversions? And then sending the results over to you guys to be like, okay, so did this actually do anything or not?
I love it. And like that's exactly what I mean by like the absence of data informed is not doing any of that, versus how do I leverage my first party customer data, and maybe it's been like also supplemented with some third party household data as well. How do I take all of that information? How do I map that to a creative that creates a very compelling mail piece where I know that I'm going to drive response, and I know that I'm going to be able to convert because I've put so much intention into all of this? And then how do I measure that?
Yeah.
How do I measure that accurately? And then how do I take the analysis of all of that data and feed it back into my model so that I can A/B test in the next cycle and do that quickly and not have to wait for the results and not have to ship several campaigns with a non-performing, say, creative before realizing it, and then I can course correct. So being able to iterate quickly is also like time is of the essence.
Oh, definitely. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Like it's all about the investment portion. And you don't want to be wasting that, especially sending out mail that in the end, you're not getting results on.
I could not agree more. And I love A/B testing because it's still testing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I really think about, that is a great maybe phase two. So if we think about like a marketing maturity scale, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like where that's somewhere in the middle, but there's still kind of a time delay because I'm really only testing two elements. I still have to have a lot of controls in place to
Yep.
make sure like the validity of my scientific approach is sound.
Mm-hmm.
I have to ensure that everything is measurable, and then I do the analysis. And if I could run, several A/B tests in parallel, and I can A/B test, quickly, like ideally to get that into like maybe a 60-day time frame, so I can still course correct within like a same quarter. But where I think that the real value is like multivariate testing. Like how do
Mm-hmm.
I do this at scale where I still have like the controls in place necessary to make sure that my experiment is statistically sound.
Yep.
The population size is statistically significant based on my historical data, and then actually conduct a test where I could get an entire year's worth of A/B testing out the door, shipped in one pass.
Whew.
Yeah.
You guys are a lot busier than I am.
Yeah. It's a lot more planning up front, but I think that the downstream effects are where you're going to see all of the return.
Oh, for sure. And especially when you get to that analysis part, which we will talk about later. But right now, I do kind of want to return our conversation back to just optimizations in general. And Tuffley, from your perspective, what are some of the different types of optimizations that our customers can work on? Like workflow optimization, technology optimization, campaign optimization. What am I missing here?
No, those are all, that's a really good start. Workflow optimization, that kind of goes back to the original point of how do I take this very time consuming person human resource intensive process that has all of those little manual steps and the back and forths that when you actually like aggregate all of the time and energy to ship one campaign, like how do I reduce that? And what's amazing to see is, you know, we work with like a very high up on the Fortune list telecom company where they started out with this very like bloated, I mean, the workflow diagram will make you motion sick. Like it is that overwhelming. And when they walk you through each of those nodes, and then what you don't even have an appreciation for because it's a static image are the little feedback loops when something doesn't go according to plan. And that's where all of those incremental time costs can really start to balloon.
Yeah.
And it was insane. So like on average, it was taking them like usually around 2 months, you know, maybe a month if they were lucky to ship like a large campaign of, you know, millions of mail pieces. And what was so cool is that when they adopted Lob and they really implemented all of the automation and were able to like really achieve those efficiencies at scale, they took this process that was 2 months and condensed it down to 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And were able to eliminate so much time from the process that they relied less heavily on their outsourced marketing agency.
Yep.
You know, so like there's all of those peripheral cost reductions that you also like you don't even realize are again going back and ballooning the overall like actual cost.
No, definitely. Well, I think we even had a webinar not too long ago with our nonprofit partner, United Through Reading, and they talked about just the manual process and how much time it was taking to send these letters, you know, donor acknowledgement letters. And just by automating that process alone, they were able to have people focus on what only a human can do and really applying their talents elsewhere. And it was like, yeah, you can calculate that cost out, but it's more just the, oh my gosh, we're getting so much more important stuff done. Because obviously the donor acknowledgement stuff is important too, but it was such a manual, labor-intensive process that being able to move that over there and then focus more on outreach, you're getting gains on both sides.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to give folks back more time to work on what's important, you know, and mail operations and logistics is not that thing that you want to be spending your time on as like a marketer.
No, I'm not going to sign up for that one. But speaking of marketing, marketing automation, it's obviously something we all rely on in this space, but how does that play nicely with optimization? Or I guess another way to think about it, what are some things that marketers should keep in mind as they optimize their marketing technology?
That's a great question. And I think that also kind of, again, goes back to the preceding question around what are the things that we're going to optimize for. So you mentioned workflow optimization, campaign optimization. I think that marketing automation does those two things really nicely, right? Because when I think about, again, going back to a manual process that's time consuming, it's error prone, it's costly. If you can have a marketing automation tool, and there's a number of them, I know, you know, a large number of our customers use like several of the Adobe products, the Salesforce products, you know, some of your, even like so many of the CRMs and ESPs and CDPs are also starting to borrow elements from the marketing automation to achieve something similar. But again, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that everything is event driven in real time. We want to make sure that it's like harmoniously executed in concert in a fully automated way with our other digital channels, so that, you know, I should be able to send a postcard as easy as an email and have those customer experiences and messaging be indistinguishable from one another. And that is, to be honest, that's what I like about Lob. And I always use the analogy, like it's not really direct mail. It's really more like getting an email in your mailbox. So, you have that marketing automation that's just running in the background. It's like scheduled or event driven.
Yep.
Every day you send out, hey, your birthday postcards to your customers whose birthdays are coming up. And that job just runs every single day. You don't have to think about it. Or you have something that's event driven. Somebody came to my site, they signed up, they showed all of those, intent signals. Maybe you had some other data and you're like, oh yes, this is a high propensity buyer. They correspond to, like a great persona within the model I've built around my ideal customer. And I want to then have them enter this particular funnel. We'll send them an email. If they don't open it, we'll send them another email. If they still don't open it, or maybe they unsubscribe, we'll send them a postcard. We know when that postcard is delivered with Lob. We know when that QR code is scanned with Lob. And then we can use that, like our webhook technology, to return all of that data back to your marketing automation platform. And then we know, oh, cool, we can move to the next sequence in that automated customer journey. I didn't have to put like an arbitrary 14-day delay there where I just hope in a prayer that it had arrived in that time, that it had actually been seen. Like I now have, again, conducting all of this automation informed and in real time, again, goes back to like campaign optimization. I know exactly what creative was being used in service of that particular campaign, or even better, like for that specific customer. Like maybe we have that level of personalization. So I know, okay, great. They received it, they acted on it. I can make sure that I can do the proper attribution, and then I can do the analysis in the back end. So those are all of the things that we like to see. And again, it's just a cycle where it's just, shampoo, rinse, repeat.
Yep. Oh, I've talked on the podcast before at one of my previous organizations. I really wish we had found a service like Lob, because we were sending nurture emails and you would start to notice when people were dropping off, or worse, hitting that unsubscribe button. And it's like, oh, if we had an opportunity to send them a postcard, break up the cadence, stretch that nurture journey out and across multiple channels, I think we probably would have seen a lot more success.
Could not agree more. And what's funny is I realize like email is like quick and easy. It's cheap, but at the same time, like I'm guilty of this even with like one of our customers, where I did not act on any of the emails. Oftentimes they get relegated to that extra tab in the back on my Gmail.
Promotions.
And so I never saw it, never opened it, but I got a postcard, and it's nice because and this is not even reflective of the fact that I work in the space, but I like to be reminded of something. So like I'm like, oh yeah, cool. I do want to act on that at some point. So I'll just like leave it on my coffee table, or magnet it to your refrigerator. And then Saturday night rolls around after a couple of beers, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna pull the trigger on that. And that was like
that coupon code.
Yeah, exactly. And that was the experience that I had. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And I think about from a marketer's perspective, like it's not even just about the fact that your open rates are really low, that your click-through rates are even lower, but like now that we've had all of this implementation of like privacy intervention measures being done by the largest companies in the world, Apple, Google, like we don't even have great insight. And one of the cool things about the direct mail channel is there's literally no intervention that they can take that's going to distort any of my ability to measure the effectiveness of that campaign.
Yeah. All right. So earlier we kind of talked about waste and making sure that we're getting the most out of our investment. So before we move on to our next topic, I just kind of quickly want to discuss optimizing direct mail campaigns through address verification. Tuffley, can you talk a little bit about that and how that can reduce waste and just streamline campaigns?
Yeah, that's a great one. So there's a couple of different things that I think about when I approach, like, okay, I want to ensure the integrity of my data.
Mm-hmm.
Trash in, trash out. So the better we can clean this up prior to launching a campaign, the better. So when I cull all of the members of that audience that I want to target,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to run it through AV to just do that additional peace of mind. Again, we're talking about something in the real world that's like somewhat disconnected digitally. So the time between when you last sent them something and they received, there's a great chance that they could have moved, that address no longer even exists, or maybe they've implemented some sort of solicitation mail, interception type of things. So when I run that list through AV, I get a number of different factors back. Like one, like, is it just deliverable? Is this a real address? If it's not, like, is it a real address, but maybe it's missing like a unit number, so there's still a high likelihood that it will get to where it's intended? Or is this just like Joker data, like, 123 Butt Street probably is probably a waste of that mail cost, right? So, the being able to just understand whether or not it's deliverable, and then I look at maybe some of the other facets of the data that's returned from that address verification, things like knowing how it's zoned. If I'm sending out an offer for I don't know, pet services, I don't know that maybe sending it to a commercially zoned address is like it's going to get to where it was intended, or if it would actually be acted upon, so that I know whether or not it's residential or commercial. I know whether or not the unit is currently vacant. I know whether or not Lob, who, this is where we kind of set ourselves apart in the address verification space, is we send a ton of mail, in fact, to over half of the households in the US. So we can tell you, hey, have we been able to successfully deliver mail there before? And if so, here's the level of confidence that we have in your ability to get that mail to its final, ultimate destination. So that's just everything just up front. Like, so I think about that funnel, and then now I have my final address verified list that satisfies all of my requirements, and then I'm going to send that over to Lob. And what's really cool is I have NCOA enabled on my Lob account. So when I send that request over, I get a response back. And one of the parameters that is returned is recipient _ moved. And if that value is true, you're going to see a redacted forwarding address. It's going to give you the city, state, and zip 5. And that's a constraint of USPS. We're not just like suppressing data because we hate our customer. No, this is one of those funny USPS things. But you can actually export the data at the end of 1 week. Again, funny USPS convention, but you can get that forwarding data back.
Okay.
But the nice thing about getting that response in real time is I can decision off of that.
Yeah.
If I'm beholden to like compliance, I don't want my mail forwarded and then now I'm in breach of some sort of regulation, right? The case that I had illustrated before, where if somebody sends something and they want to go to a household where the offer is valid but not have it forwarded, I can act. I can literally decision off of that. I can, like, okay, cancel it to that person. Then we're going to resend it with current resident there, so that we still hit the
hit somebody.
Yeah, that we're canvassing a neighborhood or something, right? So yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think that tees up nicely to our next discussion topic, which is optimization in action. We've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but in our new optimization ebook, we talk a lot about RVA, recency, velocity, and accuracy. Tuffley, can you explain that principle a little bit more?
I can. And what's so cool is I've never invented something that I've heard like referenced before. So like that was something that I had devised last year as like a part of like the how we would grade or like evaluate somebody's like optimization, because we kept hearing like, oh, I'm optimized.
Yep.
I'm optimized.
I'm
We're like,
fine.
oh, okay, well,
Are
you
you
can't
though?
you can't can't be when's the last time you actually ran an experiment? Recency, right? Like the what's the old philosophers saying, a person never stands in the same river twice because they're not the same person and that's not the same river. Like that's the evolution. We live in a TikTok generation. Like you can't tell me that you ran an experiment on, your 18 to 21 demographic and still tell me that that is applicable today. Like
Yeah.
that is not recency. So that's one of my that's like what I use. It's a little bit hyperbolized, but I definitely think that it holds true.
Yeah.
And I have a 15-year-old daughter, so I think I can attest to how quickly these things evolve, especially in an instantaneous digital world.
Oh yeah.
And then the next thing is velocity. Is I'm sure that you are near optimized in your digital channels because you're able to quickly like iterate, test, and try again. Like you just run that cycle very quickly.
Yep.
But if you're doing like a traditional print and mail, like that's just not possible. So if you're not
Mm.
moving quickly, and in fact, one of the things that I love to ask marketers when I first sit down at the table with them is like, hey, what are you doing successfully today in your digital channels that you would like to map over to direct mail so
Mm.
that you can see even higher response and conversion rates, right? And then let's start running those experiments in parallel. So we have customers that are literally doing campaigns in email and then
Hmm.
taking the exact same content and putting it on a postcard. Same link, but it's been shortened as a little pearl or a QR
Yep.
code. Like everything is the exact same pair of pants that you left in your shopping cart last week, same pair of pants on that postcard. Everything is one-to-one, except the difference is somebody will see this.
Then it's like the Facebook ad that's following you
Yeah.
around for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a whole nother conversation around where we get our third party data. But that's how we can take the velocity component of that, right?
Mhm.
Where we're able to do that so rapidly in real time. And we know like, hey, this person didn't respond.
Mhm.
And we're seeing this campaign not materialize within the first, 30 to 60 days. Let's course correct and let's change up those different elements. And I love like your example earlier about, even if it's something as trivial as like lifestyle imagery, like what do we know about our customers? What can we do to map that to an experience? If I know that they're a teacher or a vet, I want some imagery of, someone in fatigues, like giving their kid a big hug, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the type of compelling imagery that's going to resonate with my target audience.
You
So
want to see yourself reflected back in the marketing materials that are coming to you. And
yeah.
then the
So
accuracy portion, can you talk about
oh
that?
yes, thank you. So I keep going back to this parallel to email, right?
Mhm.
And one of the really nice things about your email, your social, your SEO, like all of those digital channels, it's very easy to measure. I log into my email account. I have one that I send emails out with. So I see what my open rate is, my bounce rate, I see my click-through rate, all of that, being monitored in real time. And that's
Yeah.
how I can gauge the accuracy. Um, you don't really get that with traditional print and mail. Like I think for the most part, it's primarily a black box. Like you just hope that it gets there and
Yep.
you look for that halo effect
Yep.
or some sort of a conversion that you think is within that 21-day attribution window. Like all of these very muddy types of of measurement methodologies
Yeah.
of last year, and how do we do that, take that digital, like
Mhm.
how do we take that digital measurement experience? So that's where we talk about like accuracy is like, hey, how complex, how sophisticated is your attribution model?
Mm.
Are you just doing single touch, first touch, last touch? Are you doing like a really cool multi-touch attribution model, or
Mhm.
something like, or maybe like a time decay type of model? We're doing a combination of a weighted first and last touch. So those are really easy to do with digital mail, or
Yeah.
I'm sorry, with digital channels. With direct mail, if you don't know when something's delivered, how do you know when to start the clock on even that simple 20 to 21 day attribution window, let
Yeah.
alone your time decay curve of how much weight you're going to give that touch in the overall model, right?
Yeah.
Because so many of our customers, again, going back to the marketing automation, this is so many touches across digital direct mail that nobody's just like sending, like I'm sending email and like, or direct mail, like it's multi-touch. Most of them are like omni-channel, like our larger customers. So being able to know exactly how much weight to give that mail piece, and then that's how you defend the spend in a channel like digital mail.
Yeah, I've even talked on the podcast before about how I'll get a piece of direct mail and maybe it has a coupon code. That coupon code is going to expire at some point, most likely. I'll put it with the rest of my mail. It sits there, gets a little dusty, and then I'm cleaning it out, and then I come across it. The coupon code may have expired, but I still will be like, oh, maybe they're running a different sale. I can go to their website. I know I'm going to get that pop-up that's join our email list and get 20% off your first purchase. There you go. You still got my business, even though it may not have been from that first touch via direct mail.
Right. And what I love about that model is that historically has been something that's like constrained to a channel like email or SMS, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
in-app notification. Well, we had a customer who's like, I don't want to do that. Like, first of all, I don't want a generic coupon code to make it out into like the coupon ecosystem. And then on
Copy
top
and
of
paste it
that,
everywhere.
like, yeah, and then it just, again, I get this a halo effect, right? Or like whatever, very muddy attribution waters. So being
Mm-hmm.
able to pass in like a unique one-to-one offer code, again, just improves the measurement. We have customers that are passing a UTM parameter with a customer ID, so they know when that exact customer visited the site because they can map it back through that UID.
No, that's awesome. All right, since we're kind of talking about parameters and tracking, what kind of data should marketers use to determine what needs to be optimized first? Potentially going back to our conversation around workflows, marketing tech, what are some warning signs that marketers should be, whoa, okay, something needs to change here?
Yeah, that's a great question, and um, it's not an easy answer because it really is going to vary by the maturity and sophistication of marketing operations and the size of the team and like all of those things, and how much and what type of data that you have. Like we have customers that have never sent direct mail. Maybe they're like, hey, I'm an e-com or a fintech company. I've only been around for like 3 years, and we were just heard that direct mail is awesome, so we were going to adopt it. They don't have a lot to go on. So
Yeah.
what we're going to do is say, we're going to go back to that same question of like, all right, well, let's just start with what's working in
Mm,
email, right? Or any of your other digital channels. Let's see what's
yeah.
working. So let's start the experiment there. And in terms of like the targets that we want to set is like based on your historical response rate, and then we'll try and adjust it, for the direct mail channel, so that way we actually have target metrics to be able to see like, hey, did we hit those KPIs, in the
Yeah.
success of our campaigns. Let's say they have sent mail before, but maybe it's been very limited. Hey, a couple of times we send out like quarterly postcards or
Mhm.
letters or something like that. Not a lot of sophistication there, or like historical context of like where to kind of begin like with the experiment, because unless you've been running a bunch of A/B tests, you don't have a lot of data to work off of. So what we would say is like, okay, let's see what did work. And again, we're going to borrow from the digital channels. Let's use some contextual data from the other parts that are those experiments wrap in near real time, right? So we're like, I don't know what the window is, but it's probably like a week rather than 60 days. So let's take those inputs, and then I think about maybe doing something as simple as like a prospect experiment, where we're buying like third-party data, and oftentimes third-party data comes with all of that other enriched metadata for the household. So being able to see that way, we can take like a very broad swath of folks and we can just run like a generic experiment. It's going to be simple A/B, but at least like it's that one step forward where then we can begin the iterative process. And that first step is always going to be the biggest, the hardest hurdle to get over. And then once you're there, then we move up the step to, again, people who have been doing this historically. And it's like, hey, how do we accelerate this? Yeah. How do we take the A/B testing and we push you up to multivariate testing, where we're going to take some AI generated body copy to generate like 10 headlines and 10 subheads. And we're going to see which tone and sentiment, whether it was value messaging or urgency messaging that had the highest response rate. We're going to test to see like, which permutation of the two, or which unique wording or phraseology in uniquely won out. So like, that's where we see the coolest stuff. Like I said, we have customers that are doing experiments where they're creating like hundreds of thousands of permutations to be able to test. And my favorite anecdote, when I was sitting down at the table with those brand folks who hadn't used AI, like they had to manually do all of this by hand, like a copywriter create like 10 or 20 different like heads, subheads, then all of the actual body copy that went into this letter. So it was very like time consuming process. But my favorite part was they're like, hey, what was the most interesting and counterintuitive result of our experiment is that we put this really cheesy, really campy headline in. Like it was something like vroom, vroom, come get your car loan. Like, and that wound up being one of the highest performing body copy headlines that they had. And they were blown away. And like, that's the cool part about being able to experiment, is you can challenge those preconceived notions and then iterate quickly. So they had a very involved like data analysis team that had created this really cool multi-arm bandit like data model, so that the higher performing versions or permutations would kind of propagate to the top, and then they would continually iterating on the higher performers.
I mean, you have just been speaking my language. That was one of my jobs at a previous organization. I literally would come up with the headlines. Here's what we're testing. And it's so true. It is really crazy how much your customers can surprise you with like what they end up reacting to. Because I've done social media posts where I'm like, it's kind of a filler post. We're just getting something out there and it goes practically viral. And it's what? Like, it's just, your customers will never stop surprising you. Or kind of what you said earlier with like the TikTok generation, your customer base is always evolving and changing. So you have to make sure your campaigns evolve and change with them and what they're looking for.
Absolutely. Einstein said, all the experiments in the world will never prove me right, but a single experiment will prove me wrong.
Definitely. And that's what you're trying to prove, right? Like making sure that the same result keeps happening.
Yep.
Since you just kind of were talking about A/B testing, I'm really curious, in your opinion, what is something that you think marketers should start with first in A/B testing when they're beginning to optimize their direct mail? Like, would you recommend they start with form factor, the design, the copy? You kind of alluded to that a little bit, CTAs. What would you recommend?
Yeah. So if there's no precedent for testing, we're just like, hey, this is net new. Yeah, I mean, I'm in the KISS model, right? So just like like simplicity is best. So
Mhm.
I think the example that it just gave, where you could do a couple of different versions of some headlines and some headlines, just to see like where your market is at. Like the fact that you can run these tests, get the results, measure them, analyze, and go back
Mhm.
to the drawing board, in 60 days as opposed to like 6 months, allows you to run that follow-up A/B test where like, okay, we think we have a good winner for
Mm.
like the body copy. Let's
Mhm.
start testing lifestyle imagery, and let's see if we can't map it to what we know about the consumers in that segment. Like I said, we have a bunch of people that are doing that with like the third party data, especially.
Mhm.
There's a politician who knows whether or not you're a cat household or a dog household. So it's him holding a cat or a dog accordingly that shows up on your mail piece. So
What
like
if you're a
that's
bird
like,
person?
yeah. He's like, I don't need your vote. Not who I want in my constituency.
All right, Tuffley, I've got a great question for you. In your opinion, what are the most commonly used triggers for direct mail? And what questions could marketers ask themselves to optimize those touch points with customers or prospects?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that on a scheduled basis, one of the more common ones that we would see is going to be like a daily or weekly job that runs where it's, again, it just queries your data and says,
Mm.
okay, show me the folks who haven't interacted with us in the last 60 days,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, let's send them some sort of win back campaign with like a personalized offer, and then let's try and map in all the information we know about, like maybe their last purchase, or
Mm.
or maybe the reason why they canceled their subscription, or whatever that could be, to really target them at the individual level. So those are great ones. They typically, it's a set and forget. They just run periodically. Some of our largest customers have a lot of them running in parallel. So they'll have
Mm.
their win back campaign, they'll have their remarketing campaign, they'll have their cross sell campaign, all running in parallel on varying cadences, daily, semi-weekly, weekly. And the mail just goes out. And then like, I don't know, when I think about more of like a triggered use case, something that's like event driven and done in real time would be another one. That could be something like the abandoned cart.
Mm.
It could be like a new mover. Yeah, actually, well, I'll take that back. I'll put new movers into like the weekly sense, because you'll usually get that data from a third
Matched.
party. So just kind of run it all at once. But we'll go back. Anonymous website visitor, and we've got a pixel. We do a postal append so we know who visited with what degree of certainty, and maybe some other like
Mm-hmm.
persona data about them, and then let's send them an offer like, hey, and then that's when you get that creepy like, oh my gosh, is my Alexa listening to me? Or
She always is.
I shouldn't have said that word, because all of a sudden she started talking to me in my headphones. But exactly, you're like, oh my gosh, why are all these targeted ads appearing in so many different areas? Like those are the great use case for direct mail as well.
No, I think one of the examples, I used it on our blog when we were talking about holiday marketing, and it was actually a mailer my husband got. And on it, it specifically said, Santa's been watching you at, and then it had our address data. I thought it was hilarious. My husband thought it was very creepy, but I was like, at least you're being honest. Like, come on, that's pretty clever. I like
Oh,
that.
I have there. I'll give you a couple of examples that I thought were like borderline creepy. Know too much about you. One was, it was a real estate customer that, I mean, I love the use case because of how technology brilliant it was.
Mhm.
They had a picture of the front of your house
Okay.
from Google Maps Street View, so they
Yep.
knew. I said, here's your house. So they hit the Google Maps API, then they hit
Uh-huh.
the Zillow API, said, hey, this is how much your home may be worth. Are you interested in selling? And it's like that. I mean, that's one of those things where it's like, wow, that is a lot of data. And what's great is that's not even like, they didn't have to buy any third-party
No.
data. They knew the address, and all they had to do was hit a couple of public API endpoints and present that. So I thought that was a really good one. Also, a really funny one was like a customer that they guilt neighbors into voting. Like they basically sent you a letter. It says, hey, here are all the people in your neighborhood who didn't vote. And it like kind of tries to like shame you into voting, which I think it's controversial, but I think, hey, we should all be participating in our democracy.
That is interesting. Oh, yeah, there are some unique things you can do with the data that's available out there.
Oh yeah, we have a solar company that has a picture of your roof with Google Earth superimposed with solar panels. Like, this is how cool your home could look with solar panels.
Haven't gotten that one yet. I've definitely gotten here's how much your house is worth. And I'm like, I don't believe these numbers, but all right. So before we wrap up the podcast, I would love to quickly talk about measuring the optimization results. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier, but let's do a deeper dive. So what metrics should marketers be tracking as they work on optimizing the direct mail marketing campaigns?
Great question. And I love this because this is like one of those things that really differentiates us from anyone else in this space. Like I know that there are some certain like mail tracking tools out there, like how, robust their functionality is. I don't know. But it is also segregated from how they're executing their campaign. So like having an all-in-one solution. And one of the coolest things that we've introduced recently that they're not going to have is the ability to measure click-through on QR codes. Like I know in real time. I'll give you a fun story. We did a really cool event at Taylor Swift this past weekend. So
I'm sure Kim was very jealous.
She was very jealous, but not as jealous as my 15-year-old daughter that I wasn't able to take. Yeah, well, story for another time. But I made a mobile app that allowed people to take like selfies and send them this like cool Taylor Swift, souvenir postcard. And it's got the picture of their selfie and they can send the message to their family or friends or whatever. But the cool thing is it had a QR code that when somebody scanned, I get a message in my Slack, I get a message in my email. They get an email saying, hey, thanks for scanning this QR code. Here's to learn more about it. So like having that ability to not just measure, but integrate into your other marketing automations is key value there. But most importantly, I know their IP address. I know how many times they scanned that QR code. I know when each of those times occurred. And like, again, that's all information that's feeding back into my system so that I know, hey, does this person like QR codes, or did they interact with the Pearl? Or maybe not as much resolution measurability. Maybe they were part of the folks that, called, and then I can go and see, like, does their phone match my record? So there's less. But it's a great way to know exactly when somebody interacts with, one of those CTAs on your postcard. And we now measure QR code click-through.
That's
awesome.
But
the most important, and I think way more impressive, is our delivered event. So we historically had this process for delivery event. It told you like, hey, this it's loaded on the truck. It'll be in the mailbox in the next like 12 hours. We now know exactly like when it's delivered within an hour, because they're like GPS on trucks now that tell you when they're out at their stop. So again, going back to some of those more complex attribution models where I want to know when to start that 21-day attribution window. I want to know when to start the time decay so that I can weight the touch appropriately within the scheme of other touches. Even if I just want to do simple matchback, knowing whether or not something was actually delivered so I can normalize my data to actually get a more accurate ROI calculation. And then really like having that delivered event so that I could make a compelling case, like when I'm doing my ROAS calculation, whether or not I could truly with confidence attribute that conversion, that order that was placed, whatever that incremental add on lines, with conviction say, yes, this was due to this person reading the postcard. So that's what I like. And like, again, the more of those personalized components, even some like breathing old, like new life into old technologies. We have a customer that does one-to-one barcodes because they have people come into their stores and redeem the coupons in person. So, and they know when that barcode gets scanned exactly whose postcard that was.
Oh, I love that. I mean, like, yeah, you really do want to be able to get that granular sometimes on your campaigns, especially if it is an omni-channel one. So then you can prove like, no, direct mail is a channel that we need to continue investing in.
Exactly. I love the halo effect because like people just accept it, but I've seen more scrutiny, especially in like recent months, like this past year, where there's like more eyes are on
Yep.
the marketing spend. Like, how do we defend that spend? And saying that something has a halo effect
Mhm.
is great, but with lack of, if you're not able to measure and demonstrate with like conviction and accuracy, then you have a very soft case for the channel, even if you have a lot of confidence and faith historically in it.
Yeah. No, since you just talked about the halo effect, that actually leads really nicely to the last question I have for you. How or do you often tell our customers to give their campaigns extra time after making these optimizations that we've already discussed to determine if an optimization has worked? And if so, how much time?
Absolutely. So, I've like I said, I've used kind of the 21 days. That seems
Yeah.
to be like the convention that most of our marketing customers will have adopted.
Hmm.
That's like the window that we're going to entertain the notion that this mail piece was received, was viewed, and if they had acted on that touch, it would have happened within this time.
Okay.
Um, Knowing exactly when it's delivered, that also kind of like helps to like again to weight, how much importance you would want to put on that particular mail piece. What we typically see, and it will be very like I said, one of our customers has like an army of data scientists that could turn these things around like in like the 30 to 60 days or something like that. But we typically see that I think most folks like they'll, after they do like, matchback is a really
Hmm.
common, attribution methodology.
Yep.
It's usually like around 60 days, right? The more robust your integration with Lob is, where you're getting not just like the creating mail, but
Hmm.
also receiving all of the data back to your systems, and you have that feeding into your BI tool for
Hmm.
pre-generated reports, and you're just watching your cost per incremental ad go down every day, or any of the other KPIs that you're keeping an eye on. um those are the things that we can like really optimize for, where we would like to see that to be like closer to like 30 days. But again,
Okay.
realistically, like I think 60 to 90 days is like the industry standard. But I think we could get it down with greater evolution of like our technologies and our automation.
That's perfect. All right, Tuffley, are there any final thoughts that you want to share, or is there anything you think we didn't get to today during our time together?
No, not at all. I'm really excited to see, like, I think that AI is going to be like, that's going to be my prediction. I'll give a shout out to our technology partners and friends at Copy.ai, who we've
Hmm.
partnered closely with on this front to be able to demonstrate how customers can, even in an automated way, incorporate like that testing at scale for short form body copy.
Yeah.
So that's, and we'll give it a few months, but then AI imagery I think is going to be the next
Hmm.
one, so that way you're not having to license stock photography. You're just like, hey, I know this person's like these household characteristics, give me a great ad that will appeal to them. And my hope is that that will just spit out like a family watching TV, or
Hmm.
like a dad unloading groceries from a minivan, based on all
Yeah.
of those inputs and prompts.
Yeah. Just wait for like the dad to be like having something weird on his head or something just based on the keywords that you put in there. But
Right, like, or like the 30 finger on a single hand with like a weird row of like a billion teeth. Yeah, that's why I said give it a few months. Like, our AI technology is accelerating really rapidly, so I think that that's going to be where the next step in optimization, where GPT is just going to design your mail automation for you,
yeah,
and I'll be out of a job, but that's okay.
just try and do like a commission on sending people over to copy
Yeah,
AI or something.
yeah,
All right. Well,
exactly.
thank you so much for being a guest to talk about optimizations today. This was really fantastic. I learned a lot. I hope our listeners did too. And to our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for Mixers and Marketing. If you want to dive deeper into the topic of optimization, please download your complimentary copy of our ebook, Optimizing Direct Mail for Maximum Results, at tinyurl.com/optimizingdm. That's tinyurl.com/optimizingdm. As always, you can browse our library of episodes over at lobdemo.co/lobcast. But thanks for listening, and that's all, folks.